I'm going to talk about insulin resistance and low carb dieting. Let's get started. How low carb should you go? How do you know what type of protocol is correct for you? What is insulin? What do you do to overcome insulin resistance? Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Christine with Gauge Girl Training, an online meal planning and coaching service. I'm a food scientist and chemical engineer by training, and today I'm going to talk about insulin resistance and low carb dieting. So let's get started. So guys, today I'm going to talk about insulin resistance. The reason I'm bringing up insulin resistance is because there is a big push for lower and even lower carbohydrate diets. And I want to explain and discuss what those protocols are and help you truly understand whether it is actually right for you. I think there's a big problem right now where in the medical field, obviously insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity is clearly understood. However, it's starting to cross over into the nutrition realm where there are a lot of fitness professionals / gurus who may not truly understand what this means, and they may not be able to actually identify it if their clients are experiencing insulin resistance. And there are a lot of bodybuilder style approaches that may not necessarily be working for people. And I want to break those things down, explain to you what low carb actually is, explain to you the different ratios of percentages of macros. I'm going to also discuss insulin resistance. I'm going to talk about the science and mechanisms of what it actually means, draw it out on the whiteboard, and educate you guys on some cool new stuff today. So first things first, we're going to talk about macronutrient ratios of common diets. So as I've explained in previous videos, the macros approach has had a lot of history in the bodybuilding era because counting macros has been very helpful in helping bodybuilders readjust their body composition, gain muscle mass, add mass and strength in different areas, and readjust one's overall body composition. And I'm going to draw on the board what a typical bodybuilder style meal plan ratio may be. So on our typical bodybuilder style protocol, you would probably be at about approximately 35% protein, approximately 40% carb, and approximately 25% fat. Now the thing is, when there's a lot of fitness professionals signing macros-based plans out there, a lot of bikini competitors, and they're using macros similar to this, plus or minus, I would say about plus or minus 10%, plus or minus maybe even 15%, depending on your goal. However, one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that when your goal is bodybuilding, when your goal is fitness, you have substantially more muscle mass than the average person who is trying to lose weight. If not, you're trying to get to that point. And the more muscle mass you have, the more glycogen you can store. So you may see some of these fitness models or people on Instagram saying, oh wow, I'm eating so many carbs, and you don't know how on earth they're doing it. Well, if you have more muscle, you have the ability to store more glycogen. Why? Glycogen is stored in muscle. So even though some of these people may look very lean and fit and curvy and may have a very nice physique, you may not actualize that they have a significantly higher percentage of lean muscle mass than you do. And for that reason, they can probably tolerate a much higher level of carbohydrates than you can. So I want to talk about how this compares to a few other approaches that are floating around out there. So the next one I'm going to talk about is a paleo style approach. Now paleo does not have very strict rules as far as macro ratios. However, paleo has more rigid rules about what you can eat on a paleo style protocol. But the general idea behind the paleo mindset is to eat more real food, minimize inflammation, and naturally heal your gut and things of that nature by eating real food. However, because the paleo style protocol is gluten-free and grain-free, meaning no rice, no breads, no pasta, it has a tendency to be lower carb due to the default that those foods are not included. So this is a general rule of thumb. So for paleo, you're at approximately, I'd say about 40% proteins. Your carbohydrates are roughly 20%, a lot of these coming from things like squash, fruit, things of that nature. And your fats are going to be slightly higher on this protocol at about 40%. After that, there is just general low carb. A general low carb protocol would be at approximately 40% protein, approximately 10% carb, and approximately 50% fat. You can see that as the carbs are dropping, the fat is going up. And then there's a keto style protocol, which I talked about in the last video, where you're at roughly 20% protein, 5% carb, and 75% fat. Now, if we were on a 1,500 calorie diet, I'm going to write down how many grams of carbohydrates you would be consuming. If we were on a 1,500 calorie diet, and you were on a typical bodybuilder plan, this would translate into approximately 150 grams of carbs. If you were on a paleo style plan, that would be roughly 75 grams of carbs. If you were on a low carb plan, this would be 37.5 grams. And if you're on keto, this would be 18.75 grams. Now, for the sake of some of these lower carbohydrate protocols, I am considering that to be net carbohydrates. When I say net carbohydrates, I mean you're taking your total carbohydrates minus dietary fiber, and that's how I'm getting these values. So what I wanted to point out here, given the same calorie level, you could have a variety of macronutrient splits, and with the carbs going down significantly from being able to take 150 grams of carbs per day all the way down to less than 20 grams. So the question that we want to answer today is, how do you know what type of protocol is correct for you? So now that I showed you guys examples of a variety of different macronutrient splits, we want to answer the question, how low carb should you go? That is going to depend on how sensitive you are to insulin. So before I get into insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, we're first going to answer the question, what is insulin? The simplest way I can describe insulin is a hormone. Hormones function as messengers in the body, and insulin, specifically, insulin's job is to tell your body what to do with the carbohydrates that it eats. So what happens is you eat carbs. Those carbs get digested in your stomach, and then the carbs are broken down into glucose. That glucose is released into your bloodstream. Now, once that glucose is in your bloodstream, it can go one of three different places, and I'm going to draw it on the board and explain to you the role of insulin in your body, how it's supposed to tell the carbs where to go, and when you have a problem with that. And if you have a problem with that, that means you're insulin resistant. So follow me on the whiteboard for this explanation. All right, guys, so I'm going to draw a schematic of what's actually happening. So you eat carbs, right? All right, we got some carbs. These carbs get digested. And once carbs are digested, they form glucose. Glucose is then released into the blood. So let's say here's our blood. Here's our blood. And we have all this glucose in the blood. This means that you have increased your blood sugar. Your body does not want to be in a state of high blood sugar. It doesn't want that in there. So what happens is, here's your pancreas. Your pancreas releases something called insulin. Now, like I said, insulin is a hormone. It's a messenger hormone that tells your body what to do with this glucose. Now, that glucose can go one of three places. It can go to the liver cells, it can go into muscle cells, or it can go into fat cells. So the thing is, insulin I'm going to draw this here like an eye, it's going to be released because the insulin's job, it's a key. The insulin is going to take all of this to let the glucose go inside of the cells. We want the glucose to go inside of the cells. If you are healthy and your insulin functions the way it's supposed to function, the insulin will grab the glucose. It's like a key which will open the gate, because your cells will only let glucose in if insulin says it's allowed to go in. So this door opens. Your muscle cells say, okay, glucose, you can come in, and it's stored in here in the form of glycogen. It's also stored in the liver. However, it can be stored as fat. We'll talk about that in a second. The problem is, essentially, we want to clear out all of this blood sugar. We want it to go inside of the muscle and the liver. That's where we want it to go. However, there's a problem. If you are insulin resistant, it means, okay, you have all this insulin here in the bloodstream. It's grabbing your blood sugar. It's trying to get it to go inside of the cells. However, the cells are like, hey, I don't see you. And your pancreas is like, wait, what? I sent insulin. Insulin's supposed to take all the blood sugar inside the cells. However, if the insulin is not able to move the blood sugar inside of the cells, it's going to release more insulin. It's going to release more insulin. So then there'll be even more and more insulin. So here's the problem, you guys. You got all this insulin spiked up, trying to grab all of this blood sugar and get it out of your blood and into the cells. The problem is, since the glucose is not able to go into your cells, you're going to feel hungry because you ate the food, but you are cellularly starving because you don't have this blood sugar to use as the form of energy. And if you are insulin resistant, your body needs to push so much insulin into the blood to be able to wipe this stuff out so that it would go into storage in the muscle, the liver. However, the more insulin you have, the less likely your body is able to burn fat because the pancreas is too busy producing insulin, because the pancreas also produces something called glucagon. Glucagon is what tells your body to drop and burn body fat. So this is a big, huge problem. The problem is, if you are insulin resistant, your cells do not know how to properly respond in the presence of glucose in your bloodstream. That's a big problem for two reasons, because excess glucose in your bloodstream, it gives you a high blood sugar. That's a problem. That's a toxic state. And that's almost like pre-diabetes. And number two, your cells do not have energy. You just ate all that food, but if you just ate a bunch of carbs and you still feel like you are weak and do not have energy, it is because the energy that you ate is not able to go inside of the cells to give your body a source of fuel. And it's really crazy. So the thing is that it's a problem because you have so much insulin in your blood, and it is going to make it even harder to burn off stored body fat. And not only is it going to make it harder to burn off stored body fat, it is going to make the glucose that you do have in your body much more likely to be stored as fat, as opposed to glycogen, which would go in your muscle to be used for fuel. So what do you do to overcome insulin resistance? Overcoming insulin resistance can be quite complicated, and it's going to vary person to person. I can give you some general rules of thumb, but when it comes to overcoming insulin resistance, I do encourage a few things. Number one is I encourage you to get more sleep and minimize stress. Those two things are very basic, but should not be underestimated in their ability to minimize stress, minimize your body's cortisol levels, which is going to improve your insulin sensitivity. The words insulin sensitivity is a good thing. You want to be sensitive to insulin. If you are sensitive to insulin, that means your pancreas says, okay, here's some insulin. The insulin says, all right, glucose, I got you. We're going to take you over to the muscle cells, and we're going to use you for fuel over there. If you are insulin sensitive, insulin is able to do its job without problems. If you are insulin resistant, that means that your body pushes insulin into the system where insulin is trying to take the glucose to the cells, but the cells are saying, no, I don't see you. The cells are not allowing insulin to come in, so your body is going to make more and more and more insulin, therefore making you insulin resistant. The goal is to be insulin sensitive. That is a good thing. Now, the problem is some of you have been trying a lot of different things and it's not been working. And I think it's going to be very, very crucial for you to, number one, make sure that you are in an appropriate caloric deficit for your goals, that your calorie level is not too low to begin with, number one. Number two, your caloric deficit is no greater than 500 calories per week. Number three, you want to make sure that you might want to start shifting your macronutrient composition to a slightly lower carbohydrate range, but you may want to do it gradually. Now, in the beginning of this video, I showed you a few step levels down where the carbs went down slightly and the fats went up slightly. You may not want to jump right into a ketogenic approach. You may want to go into a more paleo approach first, and then maybe a little bit lower carb approach first before even getting into a ketogenic protocol, because you want to see how your body's going to respond to that first. This is not the end-all be-all answer for everybody, but if you genuinely have insulin resistance and you are just not able to manage that, this is something you definitely want to try. The next thing is you definitely want to start weight training, because when you weight train, your muscles need to be replenished with glucose. However, the beauty of that is that it's not going to depend on insulin being involved in that. There will be a replenishment step without that, so weight training is very important. If you have more questions, I am going to do more videos on insulin sensitivity. I'm going to do more videos on insulin resistance, more videos on keto, more videos on low carb diets, but comment below, ask me your questions. I'll do my best to explain them in the coming videos. I hope you found this helpful, and if you are not sure what you should do next, I advise you to either get a custom meal plan or get a consultation while they last. I have very, very limited space for consultations, but if you need one, I would encourage you to get one now, because I am booked up for the next 2 weeks, but you need to get on a waiting list for the consultation. So if you want one, you need to book now. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.